Hi, in the last episode, we talked a little bit about what mindfulness is and some of the science behind it. In this episode, we will dive a little bit deeper and offer you a series of simple practices that support you in practicing mindfulness every day. Hi, my name is Ingo Raut. Welcome to the School of Becoming, where this month is dedicated to mindfulness. As the year winds down, we all had our experiences in 2020, and most of them have been pretty stressful. So for that reason, and because it's the end of the year, we thought we'd dedicate this month to mindfulness. Together with an amazing team of supporters, as well as with Managed Magazine, we bring you a series that takes you all the way from an introduction to mindfulness to some of the practices in business, in parenting, and elsewhere. Today's session will be about mindfulness and compassion, which today's presenter, Dagmara and Marie Batelaan, see as the two wings of the practice. Together, they have practiced mindfulness and taught mindfulness for over 12 years. They met as social workers at the Holland Bloorview Kids Rehab Hospital here in Toronto about 12 years ago, when they also took a course about evidence-based mindfulness at the University of Toronto. Since then, they both have been practicing as instructors and practitioners in mindfulness. They also have a professional practice on the side that offers mindfulness courses and experience to people like you and me called Mud and Lotus Wellness. With that, I'm very happy to welcome Dagmara and Marie.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. We're really happy to be here with you today. So I'm Dagmara. As you can see on my Hollywood Square, my name should be popping up. And Marie is my partner in crime and colleague and dear friend. And I'm going to pass it over to Marie to get us started with just a quick little practice to help us land here in this space and with each other.
Thank you, Dagmara. So I'm going to invite everybody to just take a moment to perhaps find their seat and just closing their eyes if that's available to them, or just gazing a few feet in front. And just bringing attention with intention inward towards your body and towards your breath. And just taking a nice, big, fulsome breath in. And at the sound of the exhale, just going, ah. And just seeing what presents itself for you in this moment, and coming back to the room and opening your eyes. I'm going to pass it over to Dagmara to begin our talk together today.
So where we'd like to begin today is to share some definitions, to review some concepts that are going to really ground us in our time together. Because there's lots of definitions out there actually about what mindfulness is specifically, some varied ideas about what compassion is as well. And we want to start there. So we're all on the same page. So I'll start off with defining mindfulness. And as I said, there are many, many different definitions, no sort of really one agreed upon definition necessarily of what mindfulness is. What tends to be a common thread throughout the definitions that you're likely to see are sort of these components of intention, which is what Marie invited you to bring to that short little practice that you just did, attention and attitude. So these are sort of really three components that tend to be threads throughout the various definitions that are offered. And the definition that we tend to like quite a bit comes from Jon Kabat-Zinn, who really was, fundamental in bringing mindfulness to the West. Over 30 years ago. He's also the creator of MBSR, so the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Program. And so the definition that Jon Kabat-Zinn offers is the awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose to the present moment and non-judgmentally to the unfolding of experience moment by moment. So there's a lot sort of in that definition. But again, when we sort of break it down, it really does come down to, we're paying attention to the here and now, with this, with intentionality to be present. And we're bringing in this attitude of non-judgment, or we can also think about it as compassion, because that's really the, what's in this definition. Non-judgment really is about having this compassionate stance towards ourselves, which is perhaps different than what we're used to when we're interacting with ourselves in the world. So now I'm going to move us on to the definition of compassion. And the one that I'm going to share with you comes from a researcher named Tanya Singer. You may be familiar with her. She's from Germany. She has done a lot of research around compassion. Lots of really fantastic information comes from her. She's got lots of resources, so we would encourage you to check her out as well. So Tanya Singer defines compassion as, she characterizes it as a feeling of warmth, concern, and care for the other, and a strong motivation to improve the other's well-being. So this is really about sort of noticing that someone is in distress, is suffering is the word we tend to use within the field of mindfulness, and then being called upon to somehow alleviate that distress. We're motivated to do something about it. And then that becomes compassionate action. So that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about compassion. I'm also going to share a definition of self-compassion with you, because the way we like to think about it is compassion is actually a circle, and it can't be complete if we're leaving ourselves out. And I'll get back to that point after I've given you the definition, because I'd like to expand on that a little bit. So self-compassion involves treating yourself with the same kindness, concern, and support you'd show to a good friend. And it springs from the heart of mindfulness during moments of suffering. So that definition comes from Kristen Neff, who is one of the co-creators of the Mindful Self-Compassion Program. The other person who created that program is Christopher Germer. And so what I'd like to point out is that from the contemplative traditions from which mindfulness and compassion, come from in terms of this context, compassion was never sort of parsed out as self or other. When we talk about compassion, that includes ourselves and those around us, the world around us, really, in any sort of relationship that we have, that, compassion can enter that space, but it's never sort of separated from ourselves. In the Western context, we have sort of separated these ideas from one another. And so we're offering you these different definitions, but that's something to keep in mind, that even with the definition of mindfulness, it has compassion in it. And so really true mindfulness is always compassionate. And so with that, I will pass it over to Anna Marie to talk a bit more about this relationship between mindfulness and compassion.
So we really wanted to talk about the two wings of compassion, two wings of the practice, mindfulness and compassion, and how they interact. So really, when we're talking about mindfulness is the foundation of compassion. So we need to be able to notice and turn towards the suffering that we have before we can respond to it with kindness. So there are really four important roles in compassion that mindfulness plays. So it helps us know that suffering is present, and in order to respond with compassion and kindness, it helps us anchor and stabilize our awareness into that present moment when a person is emotionally overwhelmed. And compassion training is really one way to warm up the space. And mindfulness training is more calming and cooling. So we need both of them to be able to practice effectively. And mindfulness really helps us in managing difficult emotions by finding them in our body and relating to them with spacious and affectionate awareness. And it's easier to connect with our felt sense of difficult emotions in the body rather than with feeling thoughts. So we can get out of that skull brain and into our body more. And balancing compassion with equanimity or calm, spacious awareness. So we need to have that stable mind that mindfulness provides us to be able to choose compassionate action. So how do mindfulness and compassion relate? So really, compassion, as Dagmara referred to earlier, is really the heart of mindfulness. And in fact, Jon Kabat-Zinn calls it heartfulness. And I think that is a really great word for it. We need mindfulness in order to be compassionate to ourselves and to others. And when either mindfulness or compassion is in full bloom, both are present. So when we bring in one, we do automatically bring in that other. So both mindfulness and compassion allow us to live with less resistance to ourselves and to our lives. And self-compassion in particular allows our hearts to melt in the heat of suffering and let go of the resistance and not push away the suffering. So being okay with what is. And really, when we're bringing in that self-compassion, we're completing that circle of compassion. So when we take care of ourselves, we're better able to take care of all those around us. It's similar to when we talk about, on an airplane, when the air hostess is talking about the airbags, the oxygen bags falling down. And they always say, if you have a child with you, remember to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on your child. And the reason they say that is because you don't want to collapse unconscious before you help the child. Same with in compassion work. You want to take care of yourself so that you're better able to take care of others. So I'm now going to pass it over to Dagmara to unpack a little bit more the concepts of empathy and compassion.
So this is quite an important distinction that we like to share when we are talking about compassion specifically. What we've found is that often people think about empathy and compassion interchangeably, that they're really the same concept, and they're not. They're actually quite different. They are connected, absolutely, but they're not the same thing. And a lot of this, what we're sharing with you, also comes from Tanya Singer's work. She sort of looked at the difference between empathy and compassion, also the neural difference, because they are quite different in terms of what gets activated in our brain when we're feeling empathy and when we're feeling compassion. So I'll start us off with empathy. So this we like to think about as feeling with. So it's walking in someone else's emotional shoes, where we're really starting to, and actually research shows that we start to really embody exactly what we're imagining the other person is feeling. And so it's not just sort of this euphemism that we use that we can place ourselves into somebody else's shoes. We do actually do that, both emotionally and physiologically. We can start to have that sense, that physical felt sense of what the other person might be experiencing. Often we feel this most strongly when someone is struggling in some way, when they're in pain. So that, we tend to talk about that as empathic distress. We start to feel that from somebody else. We start to resonate with them. And as I've talked about, it's a vicarious and embodied experience, this experience of empathy. And in terms of the sort of the neural origins of empathy, that has been sort of linked to what are called mirror neurons. So this idea that like when we see someone doing or feeling something, that these neurons get activated, and then we start to take on that felt sense of the other. And the tricky thing with empathy, especially when we're working with people who are in distress, is that if we are, if we get exposed to empathic distress for prolonged periods of time, we can start to experience fatigue and we can start to experience burnout. So typically within, the world of helping professions, we've talked about compassion fatigue. And so this idea that, becoming exhausted in this way, becoming burnt out in this way, can be attributed to, we're feeling too much compassion. Well, actually, we're feeling too much empathy. And what's happening is what we're doing is we're actually over identifying with the feelings that are sort of originating from another person. And so part of breaking that cycle is also understanding that, like, oh, I'm experiencing some empathic distress right now, but it's actually coming from this other person and what they're experiencing. And that's kind of where the mindfulness comes in. You need to be aware of what's going on in your body, what's happening to your emotions, in order to be like, oh, I'm feeling distressed, but is the distress really originating from me, or is it something that I'm feeling from another person? So that's something to kind of keep in mind. And empathy's finite. There's only so much that we can sort of rest or be in that empathic distress before we get exhausted. And I invite people to think about, even when we're dealing with our own struggles and we're feeling pain, how exhausting that can be. And after a while, we start to distract ourselves. We start to close to that because we just can't kind of continue to be with that. So if you're constantly surrounded by people in distress and you're constantly experiencing empathic distress, that gets you exhausted and burnt out. And perhaps you begin to put up walls, or distance yourself emotionally from the people who you might be working with, or anybody in your family who you might be taking care of. So what's the alternative? The alternative is to begin to learn how to shift empathy into compassion. And so we do, like I said earlier, we do need empathy in order to move into compassion, because we need to be able to identify that we're with someone who's having a hard time. We need to sort of identify that component of suffering, in order to then move into compassion. And as you see on the screen, we like to think of compassion as feeling for somebody, instead of feeling with. And so compassion is translating that feeling of empathy into action. There's sort of an empowered and a motivational aspect to compassion. So again, we're kind of called into action. What I'd like to clarify is what that can look like can be little compassion or really big compassion. Sometimes just a compassionate action is actually just sending out some loving kindness to somebody. That's maybe all we can do in that moment of may you be healthy, of just sending out that wish to somebody, or may you be well, or just providing your presence and offering your listening. That's often what Anna Marie and I find ourselves doing in the work that we do. We work with families of children that are quite critically ill, and often there's not maybe the best prognosis, or there's sort of no turning back the clock on what's happened to their child, and yet being present and offering our listening to really hear their story, to be there with them through processing that's compassion in action. And that's sometimes all we can offer. And so it's just important to keep in mind that there's this spectrum of what compassion can look like. And the great thing about compassion is once we learn how to cultivate it, it's actually an infinite resource. Within Buddhism specifically, it's known as one of the four immeasurables. And the idea is once you know how to touch compassion, you can actually embrace the entire world with it, because it's this sort of well that never dries up. But like mindfulness, it requires practice. It requires us to learn how to warm up our hearts, how to touch that, that part of us, and then turning it from a trait into a state where that's sort of the natural place where we're coming from in our lives is from a place of compassion. And that requires practice, just like mindfulness. And I see I've left out something. So something to note is for those of you who might be interested in sort of the brain pieces of this, sort of some of the research behind empathy and compassion is, so empathy is linked to and associated with the pain centers in the brain. So when empathic distress specifically comes up, that is what gets activated. And when we're in a state of compassion, so positive emotions get activated. The brain regions in our brain that are associated with positive emotions get activated. So positive emotions like maternal love, for example, get activated when we're in compassion. And if there's actually been research done that if you sort of stay in this state of empathy for too long, you just get exhausted. This is also some of Tanya Singer's work. She's done some really interesting work with a gentleman named Matthew Ricard, and he's known as one of the happiest people alive. He's a Buddhist monk. And so she did some brain imaging work with him while he was actually in a state of empathy and in compassion. And so he talks about that experience as well. So that's something else that you can check out to sort of explore this topic further. Okay, and so I will pass it on to Anna Marie to talk a little bit about why you would want to practice mindfulness and compassion.
So as Dagmara was mentioning, we really need to think about the fact that we're trying to not fall into that empathy fatigue, especially, herself, myself, we're in helping care professions where we're running towards the suffering of others. So it's really important to think about mindfulness practices and compassion practices as a way of building resources and resilience within us and help us really suffer less. And it also helps us to develop greater emotional well-being and help us deal with the difficult emotions that arise in life. It also helps us to attend to both mental and physical health and learn to take care of ourselves. There has been thousands of research studies that have shown that people who practice mindfulness and who practice compassion experience greater well-being, and they have less depression, less anxiety, less stress, less shame, and more happiness, more life satisfaction, more self-confidence, and better physical health. So those are all wonderful reasons to think about that. So we're going to be moving in. We wanted to leave some time to actually do some practices because we really feel that it's important not only to speak of this, but to actually experience it, because it's important to see how this plays out for ourselves. So I wanted to just introduce you to several integrative ways of incorporating mindfulness, compassion-based practices into your everyday life. And then I will pass it back to Dagmara to do a short affectionate breathing practice. So first, we're going to start with the integrative practices into everyday life. So when you think about how we started off the session today, we did a little bit of gentle vocalization. So that's just one way of bringing in some compassion into your everyday life. So on your out breath, you're going, ah, or oh. And it's interesting, there's research that's showed that if you can actually do a little bit of gentle vocalization and or soothing touch, that really helps us kind of be there for ourselves. And that leads us to the next practice, which is soothing touch. So this is an invitation to explore a soothing touch that is meaningful to you. So for example, a hand over your heart or two hands over your heart, or perhaps something your caregiver did. Maybe your mom or dad cradled your cheek or with one hand or two, or maybe they stroked your hair. If you can land on something that is meaningful for you, that's a really nice in the moment practice. Short, brief, helpful. Another one is soles of the feet. So this is an invitation to notice the sensation of your soles of your feet on the ground. So I'm just going to invite you to just check in with that. How do your feet feel in your shoes right now, on the floor, on the ground? Are they warm? Are they cool? Just checking in. And then there's the sense and savor walk. This is an invitation to notice and savor any attractive objects or positive intentional internal experiences slowly, one after another, using all of your senses. I love doing this one outside when in nature. It's you can kind of be like a bumblebee and just going sort of from one flower to the next, or kind of this tree's calling your attention or that bird. And you can kind of just move about your space and bring all your full awareness and full presence to each moment. Another one is to pick an ordinary activity. So for example, if you like to drink a cup of coffee or tea, or if you're brushing your teeth, something you do already, or take a shower, can you explore that sensory experience and immerse yourself into that experience, and then bring gentle, friendly awareness into the activity? I know for myself, when I first was doing practices like this, when I was brushing my teeth, I noticed, hey, I missed a whole piece over here. I need to get back and do a little bit more work. And even with the shower, like, it's amazing how we go into the shower if we do it in the morning and we're planning out our day and we're not thinking about just how does that water feel on our body. So stopping and checking in and just practicing in the moment is a really great way to practice some of these things. Loving kindness phrases. So as Dagmara was referencing for us, you can create your own loving kindness phrases, or you can use ones that already exist. So ones like, may I be happy, may I be healthy, or even I love you, and you can offer this to yourself when you first wake up or when you're going to bed. You can send it out to others. It's a nice practice sometimes, just walking down the hallway at work and just sending to whoever is coming down the hallway, may you be happy. May you be happy. Bells of mindfulness. So you can choose one or a few things that you regularly do in your day to be sort of what we call a bell of mindfulness. So coming back to yourself, to the here and now in your breath, even if it's just for a moment. So for example, if you get a notification on your phone that ping, you got a text or something, maybe that's a stop and pause and breathe. Or perhaps before you're writing or reading an email, or you're washing and sanitizing your hands. Or even when you're putting your face mask on in these times of COVID, maybe every time you need to take that mask on, you stop and do a little bit of a practice. Another great one is gratitude. So thinking about at least one thing you can be grateful for in yourself and your experience, keeping it simple and being grateful for things like buttons or running water, pens, clothing, or even just if there's any part of your body that is healthy and pain-free, or even just your ability to get up in the morning and to manage to stay awake and to feed your family. There's lots to be grateful for, and it's a great way to practice informally and integratedly if you can do that. And then another really great one is to ask yourself the question, what do I need right now? So we already know how to be compassionate to ourselves. And so looking at what does that mean for us? Physically, perhaps that means maybe we need to exercise or massage or have a cup of tea. Mentally, maybe meditating or watching a funny movie or reading an informative book. Emotionally, maybe we're soothing and comforting ourselves or petting our cat and dog, or journaling or cooking. Relationally, maybe it's connecting to someone, reaching out to a friend and meeting up with them, or sending off a birthday card, playing a game, or just being able to, go for that walk in the woods or volunteer or help out others. So these are all really great integrative practices for everyday life. And I just hope that you walk away maybe wanting to try one of these. So I'm going to pass it over to Dagmara to lead us into a brief practice.
So before we move into a bit more of a formal practice. And this one is called, that we are going to get to experience, it's called affectionate breathing. And it does come from the Mindful Self-Compassion program as well. So before we move into that, what I wanted to expand on a little bit is this idea of integrated or informal practice and then formal practice. I think what tends to happen is that we tend to get caught in this idea of, I have to carve out 20 minutes to half an hour or however long to be on a cushion every single day. And that, that's often kind of thought of as a formal practice. And that can be really intimidating for people. It can also be really, really difficult to find the space to do that, to carve out that kind of time to do that within your day. And so I think it's just important to highlight that all the informal practices that Anne-Marie talked about are also ways of, of building this mindfulness and compassionate muscle within ourselves, of really strengthening it. These integrated practices are also really important because, we don't live on a cushion. We live out in the real world in relationship to other people, to the world around us. And so we really want to actually get the opportunity to practice in everyday life, to bring it into our interaction, into all the different spaces that we exist in. It's really important to learn how to do that because we can't do that just off a cushion. So it's sort of finding how can you marry both of these ways of practicing in whatever way makes sense for you. If you're really wanting a seated practice, but it's really hard for you to do that for half an hour, you don't have the space or you don't have the time. Can you find 2 minutes, 15 times throughout your day? Maybe it's while you're in the bathroom because that's the only time you get some private time, and you're seated, that you can practice coming back to yourself, coming back to your breath, coming back to your body, and even warming up your heart while you're at it. So you're adding that compassion component to it as well. So we really like to invite people to think of the practice as a choose your own adventure. There's so many different ways of incorporating this into your life. And part of the skill of mindfulness is learning to listen to yourself day to day and consider, what is going to work for me today? What is working for me during this time of my life with respect to incorporating this practice into my life? And that there's wisdom in that. That's a practice in itself of checking in, of going in, of cultivating being present. So we really encourage everybody to think about the practice in this way of what makes sense for you. What are you already doing in your life that you can just, bring this into of stopping for a moment, of coming back to yourself, of coming back to your heart. This question that Anne-Marie posed of, what do I need right now? I mean, you can ask yourself at any point throughout your day that question. Another lovely question is, how is my heart today? Like just checking in with your heart, and what does it tell you that you might need? These are really powerful practices, and they don't have to be on the cushion. So just wanted to highlight that piece of things for everyone. So we're going to move into the affectionate breathing practice now. So I'm going to invite you to find a comfortable position wherever you find yourself. And in self-compassion, we really like to invite you to check in with your body, see what it needs. Does it need to be seated? Would it like to be lying down? Is there another position that would be most comfortable and supportive for you right now? So just taking a moment and checking in, and then finding that comfortable position, stable position that's going to support you for the next 15 minutes of this practice. And if you like, and if it's available to you, I'll invite you to close your eyes, or you can cloak them and just rest your gaze on a spot somewhere in front of you. And then take 3 slow, deep breaths to help you relax, and perhaps, if possible, let go of whatever you might be carrying today. Just coming back to your breath, anchoring yourself in the breath. And if you wish, trying out the soothing touch that Anne-Marie described earlier, perhaps by placing a hand over your heart or another place that you find soothing. Maybe holding your hands together, or gently stroking the palm of your hand with the other. Maybe a hand on the belly. Just taking a moment to experiment with that, if you wish. And we do this to remind ourselves that we're bringing not only attention, but kind and loving attention to ourselves and to our experience. Now I'll invite you to find your breath wherever you can feel it most easily in your body. Perhaps it's at the tip of the nose, the back of your throat, the belly, or maybe a gentle movement of your whole body. Anchoring yourself in the felt sense of the breath. Letting yourself notice the simple sensation of breathing. Just feeling your breath for a while. And we expect that your mind will naturally wander away from the sensation of the breath. We invite you to not worry about how often your mind wanders. Gently returning to the feeling of your breathing when you notice that your mind has wandered. Like escorting a puppy or a young child that has gone away. See if you can incline towards your breathing as you might incline toward a child or a beloved pet, with curiosity and tenderness. Letting your body breathe you. There's nowhere you need to go and nothing you need to do. Noticing how your breath nourishes the body. Now feeling your whole body breathe, gently moving with the rising and falling of the breath, like the movement of the sea. Feeling your whole body rocked by your breath, back and forth, like a baby being soothed and caressed. giving yourself over to your breath, letting yourself become your breath, becoming breathing. And now, letting go of the practice, just taking a moment to rest in your experience, allowing it to be whatever it was. And now, slowly and gently opening your eyes and coming back to your screen. So maybe just taking a moment to stretch out if you need to, adjust yourself in whatever way you need. So welcome back, everyone. We wanted to leave a bit of space and time to open it up to questions. Before we do, I just wanted to mention that I did put into the chat our website if you are interested in checking out our resources. We also do offer different events. In the new year, we're offering 2 events. One is actually the Mindful Self-Compassion Program, which we'll be offering online, and that is 9 weeks. If you sort of would like to take a bigger plunge into mindful self-compassion, we're also going to be doing a half-day retreat to cultivating self-compassion. So you can just kind of dip your toe in as well if you're interested. So please feel free to check out our website, and that's www.mudandlotuswellness.ca. Okay, so we wanted to just open it up to questions or even reflections on that practice. Have you noticed anything that you wanted to share? That's a great question, and maybe I can start, and then Anne-Marie can jump in if she's got anything to add. I guess what sort of automatically comes to mind for me is, really making sure that you're cultivating those qualities within yourself first. I think, at least in my experience, when I have a solid base within my own practice of compassion, of mindfulness, that really supports me to then go into spaces that perhaps struggle to incorporate this into what they're doing. So I think, that's sort of foundational for me. And I'm going to say hospital spaces aren't that different from business spaces, actually. So we do have quite a bit of experience with this. And the piece that we found helpful in sort of starting to have these kinds of conversations is really looking at, what's the language that's being used in the space that you're proposing to kind of bring it in. And how do you sort of translate what you're wanting to offer into a language that makes sense in that space. And also, what is sort of the vision, the mission of that particular company or organization? Because often I think these things can translate, but it's up to us to really do that work. So it sort of lands more easily for people, so they can really understand it. Is sort of the first couple of things that kind of come to mind. Anna Marie, anything else that you would add?
I would just say too, it's embodying that practice, because I think the more we can show how this is changing us and how this practice is really being helpful for us, then the more people go, I want that. And I think the more you get people approaching you and saying, hey, what is it that you're doing that's different here? And maybe we need to look at how we can practice this more. I know for Dagmara or myself, it was very helpful. And we've managed in our workspace to actually bring in the Mindful Self-Compassion Program training for our staff and our colleagues here. And it's been a really, really well-received program and a highlight for a lot of people in their years. So I think it's starting with your own practice and showing up for yourself.
And with that, I want to say thank you so much, Anna-Marie and Dagmara. This was a wonderful session. I can even hear it in the sound of people talking that everybody's much more relaxed, including myself. So thank you for guiding us. Thank you for giving us all these insights and providing us also with these practices that we can do on an everyday basis. Like I loved, Anna-Marie, your short summary of a couple of practices that we can do or that I can do throughout my day without even introducing something new into my day, which I absolutely love. Thank you so much for doing that. And Dagmara, a wonderful practice to end with. Thank you so much.